Hi friends, my name is Baji. Welcome back to our channel. In the previous video, we explored how to control the throughput in the performance test executions using various JMeter elements. If you haven't watched that video yet, I highly recommend watching it first and then continuing this video. In today's video, we will dive into various thread group types. These thread groups offer the flexibility to create load test scenarios ranging from simple to complex. So let's get started right away. Let's try to understand more about the thread group. In JMeter, a group of virtual threads or users is represented by a thread group. It is the basic element needed in every test plan. If you want to add a controller or a sampler to the test plan, then you must have a thread group. Next, let's look at different types of thread groups. Some of the thread groups are available by default, and for some we need to install a custom thread group plugin. Okay. Next, we will take a brief look at each category of thread group. The first one from the list is thread group. This is the most basic and default type of thread group. It comes with standard configurations that can be adjusted to work for many different load test scenarios. This thread group element controls the number of threads JMeter will use to execute your test. We don't have any option to gradually ramp down the threads or users at the end of the test. So JMeter will automatically stop all the threads simultaneously when the test ends. Next, we have arrival thread group. This is not a standard thread group element, and to add this element, you will need to install the custom thread group plugin first. Okay, this element is suitable for throughput based scenarios. We can define the throughput or arrival rate, and JMeter will manage the thread creation to meet the targeted throughput. It will create new threads if all existing threads are busy in the middle of iterations. So we need to be careful with the values as it may increase the concurrency. For some reason, if we want to limit the concurrency, we can also do that using the concurrency limit configuration. Okay. Next one, freeform arrival thread group. This is also available through the custom thread group plugin. So if you want to use this thread group, then we need to install the plugin first. Okay. This is basically exactly the same as the arrival thread group, except it excludes the arrival thread configuration such as ramp up time and ramp up steps count. This element allows us to create a flexible schedule in comparison with the arrival thread group element. Okay. Next one, concurrency thread group. This is also available through the custom thread group plugin. This element gives control over concurrent users so that we can simulate different levels of user activity and assess how the system performs under varying loads. The default or standard thread group element creates the threads upfront of the test start. However, the concurrency thread group does not create all threads upfront, thus saving on memory. The next one is stepping thread group. This is also available through the custom thread group plugin. We can say that this is an old version of the concurrency thread group. However, it requires a bit more configuration. In this element, the ramp up and ramp down configurations are done differently in comparison with the concurrency thread group. The next one in our list is ultimate thread group. Again, this is also available through the custom thread group plugin. This is a highly customizable thread group, and we can create complex load test scenarios using this element. These days, most of them, including myself, are using this thread group for most of the scenarios. Okay. The final one is open model thread group. This is recently released with the JMeter 5.5 version. This thread group allows to create customizable schedules. Like the arrival thread group, this also deals with the throughput rather than the concurrency. Based on the type of requirement and the need, we can choose the appropriate thread group. Now, let's quickly go over these elements in the UI for better understanding. So, as most of the thread group categories are not the default ones, so first let's try to install the required plugin and then we will go through each category. Okay. To install any plugin, we should go to options and then plugin manager. Here go to available plugins and look for custom thread group. Since it is already installed in this system, it is not showing up anything here. However, if I go back to install plugin, I can see custom thread group plugin. So once you install this plugin, you will have access to these 5 different thread group elements. Okay, so let's close this window now. Now let's quickly go through the different elements that I'm going to use to demonstrate the different types of thread groups. Okay, so I have a dummy sampler which will be used to send the request, and then I have 3 listeners, summary report to view the results of this dummy sampler execution, like the number of samples executed and the throughput, etc. And I have active threads over time listener. This will help us to understand the number of threads that are concurrently running during the test execution. And then I have a transactions per second listener. With this listener, we can understand how much throughput we are achieving with the different configurations. Okay. So now we will start with the default and basic thread group, which is a thread group element. So before we discuss about the thread group, just to let you know that there are some configurations which are common among all the thread groups, such as name to define a meaningful name to thread group, and then comments to give some additional information about that particular thread group, and then action to be taken after a sampler error. So what action that we want JMeter to take if any sampler got an error. Okay, so we can select as continue. That means even though if there is an error, JMeter will still continue with the next steps, or we can tell to JMeter to start a next thread loop, or we can tell JMeter to stop the thread or stop the test. Okay, so these are the options that are common across all the different thread groups. Until now we have used this thread group element in every demonstration, because if we want to use any JMeter element, we need to have a thread group. We cannot add samplers to the test plan level, or we cannot add the controller to test plan level. That is why we always added the thread group first, and then we have added different elements. Okay, so let me enable this. In the thread properties, I have a number of threads defined as 5. So this value tells us how many threads or users we want JMeter to run once we start the test, and then ramp up period, how gradually we want the users to be ramped up into the system. Here I have given the ramp up period as 2 seconds, and then if we want to run these 5 users for certain number of iterations, then we can define the loop count. If we want to run them infinitely for a certain duration, then we can select the infinite option. In general, whenever we do any load tests, we always select the infinite option, because our load test always run for durations like 2 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours, and so on. Okay, and then we have same user on each iteration option, which will be selected by default. That means if there are 5 users that are running in the system, in every iteration JMeter will try to use the same user. And we have an option called delay thread creation until needed. This is by default unchecked. If you want JMeter to delay the thread creation before the actual test, then we can select this option, and then we can specify the thread lifetime by selecting this, and then the duration as whatever the duration that we want. So since this is a demonstration, I just kept it as 30 seconds. And if you want to add any startup delay, we can also define here. Okay, so with this configuration, let's quickly run the test and then go to active threads. Here we can see how many threads are actively running in the system. Currently there are 5 active threads that are continuously running in the system, and these threads will run for 30 seconds because that's the configuration that we have. Okay, and then if we go to the transactions per second, we can see how much throughput they are gaining. They're almost getting around between 18 to 22. If you want to know the exact number, then you can go to summary report, then we can see the actual throughput. So the throughput here is 18.1 seconds. So one thing we need to understand here is that whatever the throughput that we have achieved in this test is without any delays. Since I did not specify any delays, what JMeter will do is it will continuously execute this dummy sampler one after another. So that is why we have achieved 18 transactions per second. Okay, so if you introduce a delay into this test execution, then there will be a reduction in the throughput. Okay, so let's quickly add the constant timer element, and then we will rerun the same test. Here the thread delay is defined as 300 by default, so let's keep the default value, and then let's rerun the test. So in the previous test we have achieved around 18 transactions per second. Now once we add the delay, let's see how much we are going to gain, because before every sampler execution, JMeter will try to pause the thread for the given thread delay. Okay, so here in this case 300 milliseconds, so every sampler execution it will pause for 300 seconds and then it will execute the request. Okay, so if you see the transactions per second, we did not even go beyond 10 transactions per second. So if you go to summary report, we can see the throughput that we have achieved with the delay is 8.4 seconds, whereas without delay we achieved 18.1 seconds. So you always keep in mind, when you add a delay, then there will be a reduction in throughput. It is always recommended practice to have delay in the test executions. So with the current thread group, when you have delays, you need to make sure you add the required number of threads and the delay to achieve the targeted throughput. Okay, so this is all about the thread group. Now let's move on to the next category, which is arrival thread group. So let's move all these elements to arrival thread group, and then let me disable this, and then let me enable the arrival thread group. Okay, so if you want to add this arrival thread group to test plan, the process is pretty much same. You can right click, add, go to threads, and then select the arrival thread group. Once you install the custom thread group plugin, then all the thread groups are available in thread section. So you can go to threads and then select the appropriate one. Okay, in the arrival thread group also same like thread group, we have name and comments and then action to be taken after a sampler error. These 3 configurations are same across all the thread groups. Okay, after that we have target rate arrivals per second. So this is the throughput rate that we want JMeter to execute. So here I have mentioned as 20. That means when I start the test, then JMeter will try to target for 20 transactions per second. Okay, and the next one is ramp up time in seconds. When we say ramp up time in thread group, that is going to be applicable for threads, right? So here it is going to be applicable to arrival per second. So whatever the time that we specified as a ramp up, what JMeter will do is it will gradually increase the arrival rate and will try to reach the target rate at the end of the ramp up time. Okay. And then we have ramp up steps count. Here we can specify how many steps we want from start to end of the ramp up time. In this demonstration, I have mentioned 4. That means it will take 4 steps to reach to the target arrival rate. Okay. And then we have hold target rate time in seconds. So how many seconds we want JMeter to hold the target arrivals rate. In the 60 seconds, JMeter will try to continuously target the arrivals. Here in this example, it will try to target 20 arrivals per second. Okay. So that is why we can see after ramp up, we have continuous straight line for 20. And then in the graph, we have total arrivals. So this is the total sample execution that JMeter will do with this configuration. Okay. If we change the configuration, then the number will also change. Okay. And then we have time unit. We can either select time unit as minutes or seconds. Since I have selected seconds, JMeter will try to target all these values in second. If we change it to minutes, then these things will be targeted as minutes. For example, if we select minutes, then what JMeter will do is instead of 20 arrivals per second, it will try to target 20 arrivals per minute. Okay. So let's keep it as seconds. And then we have thread iteration limit. Here we can specify how many iterations that we want JMeter to execute with this configuration. And if you want to save the log thread status into a file, then we can specify the file name here. And next we have concurrency limit. In the arrival thread groups, based on the target rate, JMeter will try to create the required number of threads. So there won't be any guarantee on the concurrency limit here because this particular thread group is mainly useful for throughput based scenarios. So if you still want to target the concurrency to a particular limit, then you can define the value here. Okay. So now let's quickly run the test with this configuration and then see how the results are. Let me also make the whole target as 30 seconds so that we don't need to wait for 1 minute. Let me save and then clean up the results. We will run the test. If you go to summary report, then we can see how many samples are getting executed. So at the end of the test, we can see the total samples that we have seen in the graph. So here it is 725 because I changed the target time as 30 seconds. So, and then we can also see how much throughput we are gaining here, 16, right? So it will try to target 20 arrivals per second. At the same time, we can see how many threads it is also using. Right now, there are total 9 threads, but out of 9, it is only using 6 and 7. If you go back to active threads, we can see the graph. So here the concurrency is not constant. It is keep on adding and then removing the concurrency. And then if you go back to transactions per second, it try to target the 20 arrivals per second. Okay. If your requirement is to target only throughput, then we can make use of this arrival thread group. Now let's run another test by limiting the concurrency. Let's say you want to have a 5 as the concurrency limit. Then you can define that concurrency limit as 5 and then rerun the test and we will see the behavior. So if you go to active threads over time, it will never go beyond 5 because we have limited the concurrency as 5, right? So it will always try to stay with 5. Even if you see here, in the previous run, we have total number of threads were 9. This time it went up to maximum 5. And one thing we need to notice here is earlier we have achieved around 20 arrivals per second, right? This time we are not meeting that target because we have less number of threads. So when you are changing the values, there will be an impact on the throughput. Okay. Whenever you try to limit the concurrency, then you also need to understand that there will be an impact on the throughput as well. We supposed to achieve 725 total arrives. Because of the concurrency limit, we only achieved 568. And then instead of 20 arrivals, we have only achieved 14 arrivals per second. So this is all about arrivals thread group. Okay, now let's move these elements to freeform arrival thread group and let's disable this and then enable. So freeform arrival thread group is also same as arrival thread group. Only the difference is in arrival thread group, we have an option to specify ramp up time and ramp up steps count, right? But if we see the freeform arrival thread group, we don't have such options. Instead, we have a thread schedule. Here, we can specify what is the start arrival value and what is the end arrival value, and we also need to specify and within how much duration we want that end value to be achieved. Okay, so in this configuration I have specified I want arrival rate as 10 per second in the beginning itself and it should be there for 30 seconds, and then after that I want additional 10 arrivals to be added to the current mix and it has to be there for only 2 seconds, and then it has to come back to the original target throughput which is 10 arrivals per second and it has to run for 30 seconds. Okay, since the time unit is specified as seconds, that's why whatever the number that we have specified in duration will be considered as seconds. Okay, So you can use this to generate some spikes in the throughput like here. And then we also have the same configuration like thread iteration limit, log thread status into file, and then concurrency limit. Okay, let's clean up the results and then run the test. Since this is also arrival thread group, the main focus will be on the throughput, not on the concurrency. Okay. So if we go back to summary report, we can see the samples execution, and so far we have 9 arrivals per second, which is what we are expecting. If you see the transactions per second, right now it is targeting 10 arrivals per second, and once it reaches to 30 seconds, then it will try to target 20 arrivals per second for 2 seconds, and then it will come back to 10 arrivals second. Here we can see that spike. So after 30 seconds, it doubled the throughput for 2 minutes, and then it come back to original target arrivals, which is 10 arrivals per second. Okay, and then it will run for another 30 seconds. After that, the test will be end. So far in all the thread groups that we have discussed, one common thing we noticed here is that there is no gradual ramp down option. So at the end of the duration, then JMeter will try to stop all the threads simultaneously. Okay, so we can also see that information in the logs. So this test is also completed, and if we go to logs, then we can also see here duration limit reached, no more arrivals is needed. Then it is stopping all the threads, notifying the test listeners of end of the test. Okay, so this logs also will be helpful to understand what exactly happening during the test execution. Now let's discuss the next thread group category, which is concurrency thread group. So quickly move these elements to the next category, and then let me disable it and then enable the concurrency thread group. The main objective of this concurrency thread group is to maintain the concurrency in the system. So we want certain concurrency to be there in the system for the given duration. Okay, based on the other elements configuration within the thread group, then we will achieve the required targeted throughput. Okay, so in this concurrency thread group, we have target concurrency 5. That means we want 5 threads to be there the entire test duration, and we also have ramp up time and then ramp up steps count, same like thread group and arrival thread group. So this is the ramp up time. So here I have specified 30 seconds. Next I have ramp up steps count. Here I have specified as 5. That means there will be 5 steps before it reaches to the target concurrency, and I want JMeter to hold the target rate for 60 seconds. Again, here the time unit is selected as seconds. That is why everything is showing in seconds. If we change it to minutes, then these things will be applicable as minutes. So instead of 30 seconds, this test will run for 30 minutes. Okay, instead of 30 seconds as the ramp up time, it will be considered as 30 minutes. Okay, so let's change it back to seconds. And then we also have thread iteration limit and then log thread status into file, same like the other thread group elements. And in this thread group also, we don't have any ramp down element. So JMeter will stop the thread simultaneously once it completes the test. Okay, so let's clean up the results and then run the test. If you go to active threads over time, here we can see the concurrency. Now currently we have 2 threads active in the system because we are in the ramp up time. So once we reach to 30 seconds, then all the 5 threads will be there in the system and they will run for the target rate time. Okay, here in this example it is 60 seconds. So if we go back to active threads, now we have completed the ramp up, and then currently it is in the steady state, which is the target rate. And this is what the throughput that we can achieve with this configuration. So we are achieving around, I think, 18 to 20. So let's go back to summary and we can see the throughput here. So I think it's currently 15 transactions per second. Okay, and if you see the active threads over time, the concurrency is consistent across all the 60 seconds, right? So even if you see here 5 by 5, that means all the scheduled threads are running into the system. In other tests like arrivals or freeform, active threads over time, we are seeing some kind of spikes, right? There is no consistency. Whereas in concurrency thread group, it is a straight line. So that means those 5 threads are continuously running in the system. Okay, so if your requirement is to maintain certain concurrency in the system for the given duration, then you should use the concurrency thread group. Okay, let's move these elements to the next category, which is stepping thread group. Let's enable the stepping thread group. Basically, stepping thread group can be considered as the old version of concurrency thread group. The only difference is that it requires little bit more configuration, but both thread groups will try to give the same results because they both target for the concurrency. Okay, and the configuration fields are pretty self-explanatory. The first field is this group will start, and then we need to specify the number of threads. So this is going to be our target concurrency. Okay, and then how many seconds we want JMeter to wait before it start the actual execution. So if you specify 10 seconds, then what JMeter will do is it will wait for 10 seconds and then it will start the test. After that, how many threads we want to add, and then next how many threads we want to add for every given seconds. If you want to have those kind of patterns, then you can define those values, and we can also specify the ramp up. Here I have specified ramp up as 5 seconds. So if I change it to 25 seconds, then all the ramp up will be happen within 25 seconds. Okay, so let's keep it as 5 seconds. And then how many seconds we want JMeter to hold this concurrency. So since this is again demonstration, I just mentioned as 60 seconds, but in real time load test, we may be specifying 3600 or 7200 based on the need. Okay. And finally, we have ramp down option. Here we need to specify how many threads we want JMeter to stop for every given second. So here in this example, I have specified 2 threads every 1 second. That means every 1 second it will try to stop the 2 threads. Okay. So let's clear the results and run the test. Again, in using this thread group also, we will be seeing the consistent concurrency during the steady state. Okay. So if you go to active threads over time, so ramp up is completed, and right now it is in the target steady state, which is 60 seconds. So here we have 10 threads actively sending the request. Even here also we can see the total number of threads is 10 and the running threads is also 10. Okay. And if you see the transaction per second, here we are achieving around 30 to 35. If you go back to summary, we can see the actual exact number. So the current throughput that we are achieving with the configuration is 33 transactions per second. Okay. So if you want to maintain the concurrency and to achieve certain target throughput, then you can use this stepping thread group. This graph pretty much looks like the way it shows when we design the scenario, right? So this scenario will help us to understand how the test will looks like. So this is what exactly happened even in the active threads over time. Okay. Now let's move these elements to the next element, which is the ultimate thread group. Let's quickly disable this and enable the ultimate thread group. So this is the most commonly used thread group by many performance testers, even including myself. So this thread group also mostly focus on the concurrency. In the thread schedule, we can specify how many threads we want JMeter to start. And then we have initial delay in seconds. So we can specify how much delay that we want initially before we start the test. And then what is the startup time in seconds to start these 10 threads, and how long we want these threads to be hold. Here I am specifying 60 seconds. That means the first 10 threads will hold for 60 seconds. And then we can specify the shutdown time, which is nothing but ramp down time. And then I also added 20 threads with the startup time as 10. That means ramp up is 10 seconds. And then these 20 threads will hold 30 seconds. And then after that, we gradually ramp down. Here, that is why we can see when initially start, all 30 threads will be in the system, because the initial delay and the startup time is same for these two categories. That is why all the 30 threads will have the same ramp up. And then once they are in the system, they will run for 30 seconds. After 30 seconds, 20 threads will gradually exit, because the 20 threads count is only 30 seconds. That is why after 30 seconds, 20 threads will be ramped down, and then the first 10 threads will continue to run for another 30 seconds, and then they will also ramp down. So you can use this ultimate thread group to design complex scenarios. Okay, so let's clear the results and then run the test. And if you go to active thread group, it initially will have 30 threads, because we have two rows. In first row we specified 10 threads, and then second row we specified 20 threads. Since they both have the same initial delay and startup time, JMeter will try to ramp them up at the same time. If we go to active threads, we can see 30 threads. Right now those 30 threads are running. Those 30 threads will run for 30 seconds. After 30 seconds, 20 threads will exit, because we have designed in such a way the 20 threads will only run for 30 seconds, and then they will take 10 seconds to ramp down. If you go to active threads right now, those 20 threads are coming out, and then we still have 10 more threads which will run for another 30 seconds, and after that they will also ramp down. Okay, I think the test is completed. So we can see using 30 threads we have achieved around 100 TPS, and then after that with the 10 we have achieved 40 TPS. So we can use this kind of ultimate thread group to understand how much TPS that we are achieving with the given concurrency. Okay, and the final one in our list is open model thread group. So let's move these elements to open model thread group and enable it. So the open model thread group is the latest thread group that JMeter has released with the 5.5 version. Okay, so it is pretty much same as the arrival thread group. Only difference is that it has more customizable options to schedule the test. Same like arrival thread group, this thread group is also mainly focused on throughput based scenarios. Okay, in the schedule section we have options like rate, random, arrivals, pause, and comment. So here rate means the arrival rate that we want JMeter to schedule it, and then random arrivals is nothing but the duration, and pause is the delay. Okay, and within the brackets of each option there is a time. For example, in the rate we have 1 per minute. If we select this option, by default JMeter will try to target the throughput of 1 per minute. Similarly, random arrivals, we have 10 minutes, that is the default duration, and then we have pause for 1 minute. Okay, and then in the time unit, by default it is showing as minute. We can even change it to second or even hours. Okay, so in this schedule we have pause for 1 minute. That means we want an initial delay of 1 minute. After that we want JMeter to target the throughput of 1 per minute, and the duration should be 10 minutes, and again after that we want JMeter to delay for 1 minute before the end of this test. Okay, so let's change the pause as 5 seconds, and then rate per minute is, let's say, 10 per second, and then arrival is, maybe let's make it as 30 seconds, and then again the pause as 5 seconds. So this is the duration. So we want initial delay of 5 seconds, and after that we want JMeter to target 10 transactions per second for 30 seconds duration, and then before end of the test we want a delay of 5 seconds. Okay, so this is our scenario. So let's quickly clear the results and run the test. So if you go back to active threads, JMeter will wait for the initial delay, and then after that it will start creating the threads to meet the desired throughput. Okay, and here also we did not specify any thread configuration. JMeter is automatically calculating based on the throughput requirement. So in the schedule option we can also define some functions. For example, we can use random function to randomize the throughput rate as well as the arrivals. Okay, and we also can use other JMeter functions to create a more customizable schedules. So this feature is not available in the arrival thread group. Okay, if we see the summary report, we have 300 samples. I think the test execution is completed, so we can see the number of active threads between 4 to 6 and the throughput of 10 arrivals per second. Okay, so this is the latest thread group. If you are looking for any throughput based scenarios, then we can make use of this thread group. Okay, so in the schedule, like I said, we can also define some functions instead of giving a number. So let's say we want to use random function. We can say random, and then let's say we want JMeter to select a throughput between 10 to 100. So we can give like this as well. Okay, so we can create more complex scenarios using this latest open model thread group. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for staying till the end and supporting me. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions or want to share your experiences, feel free to leave a comment below. All the video notes have been uploaded in GitHub, and you can find the link in the description. If you are new to our channel, please consider subscribing and also like and share this video so that others will also get benefited. I'll see you with the next video in this module. Until then, take care, stay safe, and keep learning.